Should I start?
Rolling
Okay.
sound.
Rolling.
How would you guys characterize your work?
I think our work could be characterized as being a hybrid of various different techniques and various different fields, like theater mixed with visual art, mixed with musical works, mixed with magic, mixed with dance. You know, we use a lot of tropes from a lot of the entertainment industry as well as through stagecraft.
I think we're lucky to be working in the visual art world because the audience is maybe more forgiving or more accepting of things. We're allowed to do all kinds of different types of works. Basically, we use sound a lot, almost in every piece. There's maybe one piece that there's no sound in, so I guess we could characterize us somewhat as sound artists, but we really think of ourselves, we both went to visual art school, we think of ourselves as visual artists.
Sound is important for us because of how sound works with memory and history in a different way than if you have a picture, say like a 3-panel picture of something, you can see it all together, you can go back and forth and look at details. With sound, you have to remember it. So it affects you in a totally different way.
That's what we like about using sound for sure, how it bypasses your intellect, how it can get to an emotional feeling from just nothing and without any kind of story, no narrative. It can just be this abstract sound and it can give you an incredible feeling. So we met at art school.
1980. I was in printmaking, doing my master's, and he was a painter. Sometimes we do just fun dates where we'd take a recorder along and video camera or film camera back then, actually, Super 8 film. And we quite often made these little projects that weren't really, I don't know, they were sound collages, very basic, very primitive. But at the same time, it allowed us to work with ideas in a different way and established kind of a way of working together.
We always helped each other. We worked on each other's work all the time. So if Janet was doing an audio piece, I would be the editor and the recorder and whatever. And if I was doing a video work, she'd be the camera operator. If I was the actor, jumping on my feet or whatever those pieces were about. So we were always working together. I mean, we never really did a project that wasn't together.
Our first major collaboration was 1995, where we couldn't really figure out whose idea was, but we talked about a project that we both wanted to do. So we were working with a project space in Vancouver, and they said, sure, do it as a collaboration. So then after that, we realized that we liked working together because collaboration allows you to each person to bring something to the mix. George has totally different viewpoints than I do quite often about works, as well as art, as well as lots of different things, as well as he has totally different strengths than I do. So I think it's great to be able to collaborate and have two brains working on one project. I think some of the works transport you into different types of realities.
Much the way literature does,
yeah.
Or films. I mean, I guess as artists, we're sort of jealous of filmmakers. I think we envy the whole fiction that the viewer believes when they're watching a film. And I think in some way, your mind goes into a different space and you're in another world. And I think so we have tried in our work to achieve the same thing, similar thing.
But I think we try, with the different techniques we use, with the sort of especially with this show, with the theatrically based works, it's coming at the feelings and into the different spaces metaphorically, like with the carny that's right behind us. To me, when you finally experience it, it's taken you on a little journey into a bit of memory lane where you were a kid and you went to a fair and you ate too much popcorn and those sugar things and lollipops and stuff, and you had too many rides, and so you're feeling sick. And so...
And maybe your wallet got stolen as well.
Yeah, and so then you're just going to sleep and you have all these images in your brain, and then it's kind of nightmarish, like a children's nightmare. We don't always take people physically, transport them physically into the different works, but we somehow try to do it metaphorically.
But in opera, You're outside of it. You're locked out. So you're looking in. You become a voyeur. But we found that in some way, making people have to not go in is actually just as powerful because they can enter the piece through their imagination.
I think the inspiration behind the Carney was, for some reason we were looking at pieces online. We saw this cute little carousel with like a 1940s carousel with the cow and the horse, and it was so simple and it was so kind of cute, and we thought, well, that'd be fun to play with, so we ordered that and got it shipped to our studio, and then we added, you know, the curving lines with the lights on it, and we added the hanging figures above, we added the drum kit in the center, and we added the sound, and we added speakers onto the animals' mouths and stuff like that, so that we took it to a different realm. Then we thought, well, it could be really cool having the speakers rotate, and so you get the Doppler effect. So I think the concept behind was a lot to do with the sound and how it could move around the space and work with this piece of music and then make it sort of sound weird as it went past you. And then the character came, the character of the Carney came.
When Killing Machine started, we were living in Berlin in the middle 2000s, 2005, I guess, just while the war in Iraq had started, the war in Afghanistan. It was a bleak winter in Berlin. It felt like everything was going bad. And then we saw this movie by ARoS called Mr. Death, about a man who fixes the different ways of killing people in America in prisons, and it was kind of a horrifying movie.
We had this idea of making robots, and once we started producing the robots, then we realized they became these really strange characters, because they looked like those early sci-fi movies with the, you know, the Terminator takes over and they're all built. But then when we started programming the movement, they became dancers, and we realized they had personality, and they were quite beautiful. And this idea of beauty and death together was a very strange thing. I think originally the Killing Machine, though, we had the idea that we would create it almost like a museum of torture, and that it was in this old, we had in our minds this old warehouse where you're wandering through the warehouse and you come across this machine, this thing that's sitting there. It hasn't been used for 20 years, but the button's still got a light on it or something. For Opera for a Small Room, the amount of records in there adds to the whole theme of obsession. The character inside the space is obsessed. He's obsessed with telling a story and thinking about a story about this woman leaving him.
Is that what it's about?
Yeah, I mean, we both have different viewpoints about what the story is about. I think the story comes from a song that George wrote not for the piece, but he wrote earlier, and then we incorporated it into the piece. And he had seen a scene with this woman walking along the highway with her shoes in her hand, and that came into the song, and then the piece sort of started, and about the light on the feed plant near where we live, and then about the train going by, and maybe there was a train accident with a car hitting it, and, you know, all these sorts of things. It came into the story of the piece.
I mean, Opera for a Small Room started with the title. We had the title ages, like years before we actually started working on the piece. We just said, that's a great title, we should do that as a piece. And then so we were on the lookout for opera records and things like that, and one day in Salmon Arm at Church's, which is a great thrift store in Salmon Arm if you're ever there, we found about 30, I guess, opera records.
30 or 50 or something, like
yeah,
a huge amount of records.
A lot that someone had actually written their name on the front of each one, so it was out of his collection, R. Dennehy. And so we not only got some records for the piece, but then we also we were intrigued by a character who would be collecting opera records in Western Canada, where most people are loggers or farmers. And we were intrigued by someone who I also feel compelled to write their name on the front of all their opera records. So, I mean, he seemed like an interestingly strange person.
So we kind of invented what he was like. And also, to me, it gave a lot of, it was kind of sad. This idea, if you're so into opera and you don't live in Europe, you know, so you have to sit there in your little space and listen to the opera and imagine that you're in Europe in some of these beautiful big opera houses. The Cabinet of Curiousness is really an archive of a lot of our sound files. where we've recorded all over the world. And for us, the piece is completely different than for someone else who comes to it. For us, we can open a drawer and hear a singer that was recorded in England, in London in 1999, and he's singing about a war song. And then you open another drawer and it's a singer, a gospel singer, recorded in Harlem in New York in 2002.
So it's a memory filing cabinet, basically. It holds all kinds of memories for us, and some of them aren't things that were in works before. Some of them are sounds that we finally were able to use. We thought of it as a kind of almost a musical instrument as well at a certain point, so that you're opening drawers. You can open all the drawers if you want.
Like a DJ,
so
you can play it.
You can have this cacophony of sound coming out, or you can just listen to one.
The cabinet is very much also about how sound transports you. The simplicity of sound. Like I remember being on telephone, and actually I think it was for an interview or something, and in the background they were on the coast of England, and I could hear seagulls, and I was just totally transported just by the sound of seagulls. I was imagining myself on the coast of England. It works with your memory in a completely different way than pictures do. The inspiration for a storm room was well, there was a lot of different inspiration. One of the ones was we were invited into an exhibition in Japan, so it was my turn to go to do a site visit and see if I could find something interesting. So they showed me various houses, and I saw this one 2-story old Japanese house that was empty. And walked in, and then when you walked up the stairs, there was this dentist office that hadn't been used for at least 10 years, because a lot of the industry, the town didn't have a lot of people because they'd moved to the city for jobs. So it was kind of a sad little room. But it had these double windows that, because it was raining out a lot during my visit, and in this town when it rained, it just poured, I had this idea, well, we could put rain in the windows and make a storm, so that when you walked into the house entrance downstairs and you heard the storm upstairs, it's like one of those sci-fi scary movies where you're walking through this haunted house and you hear a storm upstairs. It's like really kind of strange.
So we decided to recreate that room in our studio so we could test out whether we could actually make it sound good and whether we could get the water running properly without leaking too much. But another influence on Storm Room, I think, is when we went to Disneyland. We were sitting in the tiki room, it's called. You just go into this tiki room, and there's little animatronic birds, and they sing a song, and I can't really remember much of what happens, but at one point there's thunder and lightning, and then water starts streaming down the outside of the windows. And Jan and I both looked at each other and went, well, that's something we have to use. Well, the 40-part motet started with a CD that was sent to Janet or given to Janet by a singer. She realized that Janet had an interest in sculptural sound, and so she gave her this piece, and neither of us had heard it before. The piece of music's called Spaminalium by Thomas Tallis, and was written in the 1500s, 1573, I think. Yeah, so when I put the CD into the player at home, and just thought, oh, I'll listen to what she gave me, and knowing that it was 40 different harmonies, but hearing it on 2 speakers, I felt it was just mush. I really wanted to hear the harmonies, and it was a beautiful piece of music, even on stereo and speakers, but I just immediately had this image of 40 different speakers. When Janet first presented the idea to me, I said, oh, it'll be easy, just take a bunch of CD players and we'll play them back. Play them back, and George goes, no, because then you'd have phasing problems and all sorts. And really the technology for actually doing this piece just came out that year. And that happens a lot with us, that technology sort of just gets in sync with what we want to do. My idea was that I wanted to show the complexity of the composition and how beautiful it is that it starts with choir 1, it goes to next one and moves. And so when you place it in an oval, which perhaps is the way he imagined it when he wrote it, no one really knows for sure, but when you hear it in an oval, you can feel the space around you, so it becomes sculpture. So my idea was to deconstruct this beautiful piece of music, show how amazing the composer was. So Janet's idea to take the individual voices, 40 voices from the composition, record them all individually, put them on 40 speakers, just somehow turned it into sculpture. I mean, and you hear it in a different way than you would hear it if you went and saw a choir, even performing it in the round. If they performed it in the round, you wouldn't walk up and stick your ear right in that bass guy's mouth. But in this situation, you can stand right next to, or you can stand between the bass and the tenor, and get this wash of waves of sound over your body just from two people, then move into the middle of the room and get the wash of the whole choir hitting you. It's an unbelievable, amazing experience.
Because I like to think that no two people get the same musical experience of this piece. That conceptually was interesting for me. I hope that we always imagine an audience coming to our exhibitions as people who are very open-minded, but people who want to get into the play of the thing, who will let their sense of logic and science and reality and everything like that just go and just have fun with the pieces.
We want them to be explorers, basically, or be detectives. They have to. Maybe our work makes the audience work a little bit as well. I mean, opera, the stories, the narratives in them they're not just explicit. They have to find the clues. They have to kind of explore. And hopefully that's what makes the works more moving or more challenging or more important, or gives you something that maybe will stay with you after the show.